So at this time, it's my pleasure to welcome our own professor here. So this is Dr. Pauline Samashima. She is professor and Canada Research Chair in Arts Integrated Studies, as well as the editor-in-chief of the JCACS. I think she is going to introduce our speaker for tonight, but we are so thankful to all of you for being here. Hey, Pauline.
Thank you so much, Devin, and thank you, Melissa, and the Joint PhD program for co-hosting this event. And thank you for everyone. Thank you for joining us here. So I am the editor-in-chief of the Journal for the Canadian Association for Curriculum Studies. As per our name, we are the official journal of the Canadian Association for Curriculum Studies, or CACS. CACS is an association of CSSE, which is the Canadian Society for the Study of Education. CSSE is the largest organization of professors, students, researchers, and practitioners in education in Canada. And within CSSE, there are 11 associations, with CACS being the largest. So just a little bit about the journal. CACS was founded almost 20 years ago. It's an open access journal publishing 2 issues annually. And we publish in the area of curriculum studies, understood broadly, not simply as a consideration of mandated programs of study, but as a theorization of those complex structures within which teaching and learning occur. Our most recent issue published 80 abstracts that were accepted to our annual conference before COVID isolation. Themes from that issue included environmental education, human rights, identity and agency, Indigenous knowledges and pedagogies of reconciliation, language and literacy, mathematics education, science education, socio-ecological justice, learning theories, and more. We welcome innovative ways of conveying research to audiences and support authors through blind peer review and rigorous editing processes. Most authors are surprised that it can take 18 months to move a manuscript through all the stages of publication. But at JCACS, the work is read and reviewed by multiple people, and thus it's continually being refined and polished. I'm so really very, very proud of the work that the team does. In 2019, 2 papers from our journal won National Best Paper Awards. I take our JCACS work seriously because research seeks to imagine a better future. And when we do research, we are in fact changing the world. What happens in classrooms shapes students, shapes our home lives, shapes their futures and our futures, shapes the leaders who are running our country, and shapes our realities and thus our planet. In 2019, JCACS successfully received a SSHRC grant that has grown the journal from 2 people managing it to 26 people. Please look out for our launch of our blogging site on Medium and our new YouTube channel that's coming out soon. I really encourage you to consider submitting to our journal and soon through our other knowledge mobilization venues. Our readership is international, and in 2019, we averaged about 5,000 downloads a month. This is about 170 article downloads each day. I also encourage you to sign up as a reviewer, as this is a very helpful way to learn how academic publishing processes work. It is now my pleasure to introduce the wonderful, amazing Dr. Olga Fellis, who is our inspiring book editor. Dr. Fellis holds advanced degrees in education, TESOL, and translation. In her work, she draws on ideas from learning theories, discourse studies, and pragmatics to research learning and teaching approaches and processes. She is particularly interested in issues pertaining to STEM-related contexts. In a 2019 paper that was published in ZDM, she introduced the ADAS framework to better understand students' and teachers' identity making as users and doers of school mathematics. The ADAS framework concerns processes of identity making in and through mathematics-related autobiographical experiences and their interpretation, voice and authorial identity, discoursal attribution of mathematics mindset, and socially accepted meta-narratives about doing mathematics. Olga also studies the introduction of early algebra into elementary curriculum. She has recently co-authored a paper titled Closing the Gap on the Map, Davidov's contribution contribution to current early algebra discourse in light of the 1960s Soviet debates over word problem solving. This paper was accepted for publication in the Journal of Educational Studies in Mathematics. In the last 5 years, Olga has published more than 20 peer-reviewed papers that include conference proceedings, journal papers, and book chapters. I ask you to join with me in welcoming Olga. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline, for such a lovely introduction. And thank you all for being here tonight. I know we are very busy doing so many other things, so I appreciate you taking the time off from other obligations and responsibilities and joining us in a very important conversation about conversational book reviews. I'll try and share my screen with you. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. So can you see this? Yeah, okay, good. So I will move this around. So let me start, and just to remind you, this is a conversation. I did prepare a few slides, but the purpose is to engage everybody in conversation. So if you have any comments or questions, please post them in the chat, and we will. I try and answer all the questions, and I promise to follow up if there are any questions that I did not answer or address during the presentation or in the conversation that will ensue after the presentation. So let me tell you about myself first. I am a mom of 4 beautiful kids. I am a wife, I am a mother, and so I begin with my personal background just because I want to show that in spite of other responsibilities, we can still, I believe, we can still be able to produce knowledge and be players in the field of knowledge making. My professional background has many parts. I hold a PhD in education with a focus on teaching, learning, and evaluation, a master's degree in translation and interpreting, another master's degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages, and I have been a teacher educator for more than a decade and an instructor for English for academic purposes. And why is this relevant to our presentation tonight, I should say? It is relevant because the collective experiences that we have contribute to our capacity building as knowledge producers. And I would like to speak about it some more, maybe through your questions and comments as we go along. Let me start with a question, and I would like you, please, I invite you to post your answers in the chat. What do you think, or what is writing a book review, an academic book review, like for you? So any metaphor that comes to your mind when you think about writing an academic book review, what is it like for you? Melissa, do we have any comments about some of the metaphors that people come up with when they think about writing a book review?
Yes, we have daunting dialogue with the author and community, explaining the taste, an imaginary conversation between the author and me, foggy, it'll be the first time, overwhelming. Yeah.
These are very, very strong adjectives. And the purpose of this exercise was really to generate some of the metaphors. What do we compare the writing of book review? And I should emphasize, I am speaking of an academic book review. which is a bit different than a regular book review. And I hope that I will clarify the difference as we go along. My second question was, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think of an academic book review? So some of the answers were already shared, but if we think about specifically the kind of book reviews that is the topic of tonight's talk, it is the academic book review. What would be the first word that comes to your mind when you think about the notion of an academic book review?
I have, people have posted critique, responsibility, practical, synthesis, balance, connections, summary.
These are beautiful adjectives. These are beautiful words that denote the action or the process of writing an academic book review. And I am really looking forward to the questions and comments as they come up via the throughout the presentation. So without me intentionally answering the following questions, I would like you to think about these questions. And if you don't get the answers, please do ask at the end of the presentation or as we go along in the chat, so that the takeaway lesson from tonight's presentation will be the answers to these questions. So question number one, what is a good book review? Why should we write book reviews, and how should we write book reviews? I will provide in the next few seconds a short answer to these questions, but obviously we can have a whole course, 14 weeks speaking about these questions only. But let's start with the short answers. So what is a good book review? Book review is, as one of you did say, includes a summary, but it's not only a summary. Specifically, I'm referring to the vision we have in JCACS, our journal, in regards to what we expect reviews to be like, or to be structured like. And what we are looking for is a book that goes beyond a mere summary, and that entails all the other words that some of you have posted in the chat. One of you said balance, connection. I had responsibility, and these are very important words. These are very important parts in an academic book review. The second question, why should we write book reviews? The short answer to this question is because we want to build up our skills in academic writing, and because writing a book review is less of an arduous process in comparison to a full-blown academic research paper or theoretical paper or empirical paper. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is in terms of length, for example, if a regular traditional research paper is about 10 to 15 and maybe 20 pages long, in an academic book review, what we are looking for is a text that ranges from 5 to 7 or 8 pages. And obviously, it's not only about length of a text, it is also about improving your academic skills in academic writing, and which is something that is not really readily provided when you write a regular traditional paper. Sometimes editors reject a paper just because the ideas there are not clearly articulated, or the ideas are not written in such a way that really addresses a need in the field. And so if you start with a book review, the book usually book editors provide the support that you need. Obviously, you start off with a book that you choose, or the book editor suggests that you review, and there is a back and forth process in regards to bringing this text to a publishable level, text that is at the level that the readership in the journal, and not only our journal, but any journal is expecting. The third question: how should we write book reviews? And so, what I suggest when I speak with potential book reviewers, what I suggest is, first of all, put your thoughts on screen or on paper. Shut down the monitor that really, stands in the back of our heads and says, "Don't write this. Be careful about what you write." First step is just throw everything that you have, any idea that you come up with on the screen, and then start restructuring the text. And again, the longer answer will be provided as we go along in the presentation. And if you're not satisfied with the answer, please do ask the question at the end of the presentation. What I will be building on in our presentation, my vision about what is a good book review builds on the following theories. So we have Vygotsky, and the idea of the many ideas that Vygotsky wrote about. I am specifically thinking about the zone of proximal development. And what does that mean? It means that something that the learner or that the writer cannot do without help today, but they can do independently tomorrow, is exactly the definition of the zone of proximal development. And why is it related to writing a book review? It is related to a book review because the editors of book reviews, more often than not, provide this support of something that you cannot do today without support, but you will be able to do independently as you go along. Another philosophy, a notion that I'm building on is Grice's maxims of cooperation. Grice was a linguist. Remember, I have my background in pragmatics. So I bring from that field the work of Grice, who wrote, who came up with 4 rules of cooperation, which are very relevant to the work of the writer of a book review. The first rule of communication or of cooperation, as he framed it, is the rule of quality. Is what you're saying true or not true? The second rule is the rule of quantity. How much are you writing? Is the quantity of what you're writing adequate or not adequate? The third rule of communication is manner. What language do you use? The language and the word choice that you put in your text is very important. If you violate that rule, the text is not deemed to be academic enough. And the fourth rule is the rule of relevance. And when I speak of relevance, I speak of the book that you're reviewing, in addition to similar texts that relate to that specific manuscript. The next area I'm drawing on is pragmatics. What is it exactly that we bring into the conversation, and how do we do it? And that's based on the work of Anna Wierzbicka, who actually wrote following Grice's publication of his maxims of cooperation. She suggested that sometimes what we think is the ultimate truth is actually not the whole truth. The next area is identity in writing. I am cognizant of the importance of this very strong link between the writer and their identity as an emerging scholar, their identity as someone who has their own experience, and their identity as someone who has their own interpretation of these experiences. And the last one is mentorship. And that's where I bring in Barbara Rogoff's work, where she speaks of the notion of how people learn, how people learn through processes of learning from others. And so the framework I'm suggesting, I'm using the acronym the abbreviation DCC. D stands for dialogicality, C stands for capacity building, and the other C stands for communities of practice, communities of inquiry. What do I mean by these big words? In the book review that you are working on, it is an artwork, and it's an artwork in a sense, because you are bringing together some ideas from the book that you're reviewing, plus additional relevant texts that speak to this particular book. And that would be in creating a circle, as you can see here, a circle that starts with duethnography, this conversation-like discourse that you create between you and the text, and between the text and other relevant texts. That process involves multiple iterations of writing and rewriting before you submit it to the journal. And then you build the notions that you are including in the paper by ideas from a community of practice. This group of scholars you are building on, because the members in that community share the same repertoire, the same ideas, and the same ways of thinking about things. Obviously, leaving some space for innovation and creativity. And that would lead in turn to a community of inquiry, because without inquiry and without being able to ask questions and turn attention to yet unanswered questions, we won't be able to mobilize knowledge. So how do we do that? We do it by continually building and improving our capacity in writing academic papers, which is, as I said, more supported than in traditional in publishing traditional empirical papers. What would be the first step then in writing a book review? This is not me, even though when I saw this picture online, I thought maybe someone took a picture of me without me noticing, but yes, this is this really conveys the message, like a very clear message. In writing a book review, it is not only the book that you're reviewing that you write about, it is also additional publications that stand on the shelf near or next to the book that you're reviewing. And so this picture really speaks to your search, continual search for additional texts, additional publications that were written in the area, and you're creating space of conversation between that particular book and the other publications. And so the next question that I thought you might be interested in thinking about was then, what is a good book review? Or why should we write book reviews, and how should we write book reviews? And I think I hope some of the answers were given in the presentation. So I would like now to open the floor to questions. And if you, before you ask the questions, before I unshare my screen, I would like you to think about whether you are interested in writing a book review. And if you are, please send me an email to olga.fellis@uottawa.ca. We have a list of book reviews that we would like to be reviewed. And obviously, if you have a book of your own that you would like to review, please do let me know in that email and we'll go from there. So I'll stop here and give the floor back to you.
Hi, Olga. Thank you. This is Devin. Well, thank you for that. So while we're waiting on questions to come in, and I'm sure they will in the chat, I would be happy to start. So you mentioned that people should get in touch with you if they're interested in writing a book review. Is that the process that would be typical through most journals? Should people contact the book reviewer or contact person at any journal if they are interested?
Yes, some journals do not solicit book reviews, and that means that they will ask individuals to write a book review and even tell them what book they need to review. Many other journals, however, do seek book reviewers. And so what I suggest is if you have a book that you really like, preferably something that was recently published, and you think that there is a journal that is related to that specific area of research or practice, then you write to you contact the journal editor, and if the book editor is identified on the website, to that particular person, and you express the interest, which I actually had. I had a few emails sent to me by people who were interested in reviewing a book that has to do with the curriculum, and the road to starting the process is very short from there.
Excellent, thank you. So Melissa asks us, so she's always thought of a book review as a summary of a book, a critique of the book, and maybe positive takes of the book. Is that an accurate view? Is there more to it that should be included?
So what I would like to see in a book review in JCACS is something that goes beyond a summary. And I did notice that many book reviews in many journals make do with a summary, and but that's not what we're looking for. We are looking for an academic book review where the reviewer, in addition to a very succinct summary, where you don't need to describe what each chapter of the book discusses. Really, it's just to give a taste to a reader, to give them a sense of what the book is about, what the book says, or the author of the book says what the book is about. That's a very important work it's a very important detective work, because sometimes even though authors are expected to explicitly state what the book is about, many times you need to go beyond that statement and look whether the book has provided what it says it would be providing. And that's very interesting exercise in reading. But in addition to a summary, that does not need to be detailed, because we don't want to create a document that comes instead of reading the book. We want to create we don't really want to lure readers, but we want to create this push to read the book through a very short summary of what it is about and how it is structured. And then the bulk of the paper, the bulk of the book review would be critiquing the book. As you said, Melissa, it's going to be not judging, but really comparing it with other similar publications. It can be a paper, it can be another similar text, it can be a comparison of a publication by the same author a decade ago. And that would be an interesting exercise, an academic exercise. And the purpose here is an academic book review, as its name suggests, is academic work. It is some sort of a scholarly work that will engage you as an emerging scholar and the readers who are interested in the topic.
Thank you. So that actually leads really well into a couple of questions that we have. I'll have to take them one at a time. So Jackie is asking, in terms of this being a really good opportunity for emerging scholars to build up their publication record, what does that mean sort of in the context of, you know, some book reviews are just looking at the book at hand and others are really situating, as you mentioned. So what is that sort of, I don't want to say tension, I guess, but that exists there between reviewing the book that's at hand and then also taking on the larger field, particularly if you are an emerging scholar?
Right, creating, and let me choose another word instead of creating. Crafting a book review, an academic book review, is a work of situating the work within the broader context. Now, what the context is up to the book reviewer, and that really speaks to the freedom in creating new spaces of interaction or new directions of conversations about the topic at hand. And so in our international in our JCACS international team, some of our members come from different parts of the world. We have someone from China, we have someone from Iran, we have someone from South Korea. And so this diversity in backgrounds really allows people to bring their own experiences and their own contexts that really reflects the freedom that you have. It's not reproducing what we already have. It's really bringing your own perspective, your own knowledge, your own ideas about the topic at hand. And I would like to refer back to one of the slides that I presented earlier in the presentation, where I told you about Grice's work. That was a seminal work. Everybody was using these terms that Grice introduced. And so the works was so much celebrated that it was a blow to the scholarly community, where Anna Wierzbicka dared to come forth with a work that said what Grice suggests is really very limiting and limited in the sense that it reflects, yes, it is important work, but it does not acknowledge other ways of interaction. And so she brings examples about how people from Poland interact, which do not really jibe with Grice's maxims of cooperation. She now works in Australia, and she also brought examples from Australia, which is considered to be a Western country, where she successfully demonstrates that the way things are perceived in one country or in one context are not necessarily similar to the ways things are experienced in another country and in another context. And so when you write a book review, it is, I'm a true believer. I'm being a teacher for so many years and a teacher educator, and also working with students about academic English. I I truly believe that people are rich. They have rich experiences, and they need to dare and bring their own experiences into their writing, which I hope to see in some of the book reviews that will be submitted to our journal.
Thank you. And so Holly asks, can a book review overlap with a scholarly critique of a field?
Holly, if you want to take, can she ask the question and maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, Holly, if you'd like to. Oh, Holly, we can't hear you actually. You've got your mute on.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Olga. I'm just so enjoying your presentation. So I just wanted to follow up on some things that you just mentioned in terms of the scope of a book review. So I was thinking, I had a couple of questions there. I was thinking, might not there therefore be kinds of book reviews, possibly with different slants? And is there a point where a book review might be maybe like a jump off into a discussion about the domain in which the book sits?
Absolutely, and that goes back to the notion of creativity. There is no prescribed way of writing a book review, and I think JCAX as a journal, one of the reasons I said I want to be a member in that editorial team, because not only because of the supporting leadership and the wonderful leadership, but also because of the ideas that it's trying to promote, the ideas of creativity, of doing things differently, of really going beyond what we are familiar with, all at the same time getting the right support and understanding that things are possible, that other ways of seeing things or seeing reality or interpreting reality are absolutely welcome. Of course, there are rules that cannot be bent.
I really enjoy and really like what you've been talking about, Olga, that, you know, creating a space for the self in the work is a really nice way to help others make connections to the book. And I'm glad you're back because you can answer questions now.
Yes.
So what happened? I was just suddenly kicked out of I was speaking to myself to a frozen screen. But yeah, I'm absolutely creating a space for the self without, and again, there needs to be balance between what is prescribed and what needs to be left to the individual to bring and innovate. And that really what is exciting about, particularly about my work with the JCAX. So Holly, I hope I answered your question, and obviously there's so much more to talk about, but are there other questions?
Yeah, so Holly also asked, should an academic book review help convince the viewer or the reader whether or not to read the book? So that is sort of the purpose of, you know, a literary review, but would that also be one of the purposes of an academic book review?
That's an excellent question. With all the gazillion things that we need to do, I think that one of the purposes of a book review, of a good book review, is to entice the potential reader to get a hold of the book and see how they can learn from it. And I think this is the service we are providing as writers or publishers of book reviews. And so when I ask the potential book review to refer to the worth of the book they are reviewing, it is not from the perspective of judging the book, right? It is really from the perspective of respect to the reader, telling them this is how the book can help you as a practitioner, as a researcher in curriculum studies, or in whatever journal you are aiming at. and it is providing a service. So I think it makes sense to either explicitly state this is worth a while to read or not, and this is why. Or I think it can be left out and readers will understand on their own through the messages that you are putting together in your document.
Wonderful. And so Jackie asks, sort of in line with that, what is the balance between commenting on a book's strengths and sort of making positive comments about what a book can do for the reader, but also the critique that's expected in the academy? What's the place of critique and how to do that tactfully, if at all, in an academic book review?
So to answer the question, I will tell you an anecdote of a colleague of mine who wrote a book review on one of Vygotsky's books. And after it was published, he shared some of his feelings with me, saying, I don't understand why I was asked to talk about the limitations of that particular book. And that was difficult for him because Vygotsky, for us, for me, and maybe for him too, is like a Bible to me. When I think about learning theories, when I think about teaching theories, when I make sense of how learning happens, I use Vygotsky. It helps. I think this framework is very helpful. And so when you critique, it is not judging. It is not pointing at this work said it would describe the processes of curriculum development in China, but actually it talks about something completely different, or saying something in the line of this book that covers a plethora of examples does not cover examples from South Africa. It's not about what the book doesn't have, really. It is about what the book says it will be doing and how the structure helps convey the message, how the theories that were used, the methodologies even that were used, help us better understand what we are dealing with. So there needs to be a balance between critiquing and raving, and that balance needs to be artfully built into the document.
Thank you. And this next question comes from me while we wait and see if there's any others out there. If people wanted to learn more, is there a source that you would recommend? Is there a book review or a couple that are particularly wonderful? Is there a site, a paper? Where could people go to learn more? We know that people are going to go get in touch with you if they'd like to write one, but where could people learn more?
So when we began working with our JCACS international group, and they are called international just because we want to frame an international reach to a scholarship about curriculum with international scholars. And so what I did at the beginning was share with them an article that was published not long ago about the value of writing a book review. And I think that particular paper is helpful because, and I don't have the reference here, I should have brought it with me, but and I'm happy to send it to you, Melissa, and you can forward it to everybody else with the PowerPoint presentation if they like to have a copy. That particular paper talks about the value in writing a book review, and I chose that because it is number one, recent. Number two, it has an interesting view about how book reviews can be written, and it strongly encourages people to join forces. I use the word join forces. I don't think the authors use that term. Join forces with their supervisors and mentors and work about on the book review. That in addition to an additional line in your CV, it's also a good exercise in trying to build up your scholarship. And so I introduced that particular paper. I also highly encourage people to read the sort of book reviews that you want to write yourself. And so Pauline talked about her book review, wonderful book review that really exemplifies what I'm looking for in a book review, where you don't really summarize a book. It is really bringing into conversation that particular book plus additional publications in the same area. And so that particular book review that Pauline published on Do Ethnography is wonderful, a wonderful example to work with and learn from. There is another book review that was published in the Journal of Educational Research, excuse me. And that was much shorter. I think it was 2 pages long, but it was strong in the sense of providing a short summary, a very short summary, but also a critique that was balanced. And that was very interesting to read. So I will be, I'm happy to send both references to you, or actually 3 references to you, so that you can start with them. And but basically, when you read a book review and when you find a text that you want to provide, you know, that's, you say to yourself, oh, I want to be able to write like that. Take it, learn from it, read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times with a cup of coffee, and enjoy every minute.
Excellent. I have one more question while we're waiting to see if there are any more questions. Since we're all educators, we're all really comfortable with wait time, I think, here, just in case there's any more. So the last question I wanted to ask, we have a mix of upper year and newer students here tonight. If folks are just starting, this is maybe their first publication, what would you suggest in terms of that first step of locating a journal that might be appropriate? Do you have any suggestions about that for the audience?
So when you start your advanced degrees, I assume you already know a few journals that you like, where you found a particular paper that you really like, you really liked to read because it was very well written, and so on and so forth. And so what I would do first is identify that journal and look into the website and see whether they have a book editor. If they do, send an email to introduce yourself. Say you are a PhD student and you are interested in reviewing a book, and I suggest you can do either of the following 2 things. One is bring your own text, that, you know, a book that was just published and is close to what you want to study, or ask for a book. Usually book editors have their own lists of you know, a waiting list of books that are waiting to be reviewed. So these are the 2 options, and usually once you get a response, you either get the email that says this is what we expect from a book review and this is a timeline. And I want just to encourage you, when you commit to a timeline, and you see that you cannot provide the text, don't be ashamed, or don't hesitate to let the book editor know that you need more time. I mean, we are all human beings. You know, life happens, but there is value in pursuing that objective of providing a good book review. And if you need more time, send them an email to the book editor and tell her or him or them, if there are more than one, that you need more time and that you wish to have 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, a month to do it. And don't hesitate to ask for feedback before, and obviously they will provide it without you asking it even.
Thank you. It looks like that. Oh, we have one last question just came in here. So Melissa asked, are there notable difference in writing book reviews in different languages and perhaps also maybe in different cultures, as you were speaking to before? So are there differences linguistically?
That's a good question. I did not read, I'm not familiar with how other book reviews are written in, or what the expectations are in journals that are not published in English. But I suspect that the expectations are not too different. I mean, traditionally, as I noted in the beginning of tonight's presentation, the expectation was to summarize a book. But to me, it really is not an academic book review. An academic book review really reflects some scholarship, some sort of scholarship. And so I suspect that book reviews do have similarities across languages, across cultures, and I would say that they want to see these sorts of texts where you bring a comparison, or really, I'm going back to the metaphor of conversation that you build. It can be imaginary conversation, going back to do ethnography, between texts. And that what would be interesting, for example, is take different texts that were published by the same, that were authored by the same individual, and speaking about and really showcasing the differences in time and trying to explain and speaking about shifts in understanding and so on and so forth.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had. There are some thanks in the comments from our crowd here, and we are extremely grateful. Olga, for you especially, but also just for everyone who went into putting this together and for everyone who is here tonight. Melissa, did you have any announcements that you needed to? No laundry. Okay. All right. Well, that is it for tonight. We thank you all, and we will be in touch, I think, with the slide deck and a couple articles in the near future. So thank you, everyone.
Everybody, have a good night.